people say words have consequences, that assumes a just system, a system where actions are weighed fairly and accountability is consistent. But in a country where injustice is selective, some words often escape consequences entirely, or so it seems. When institutions fail, something else steps in. Call it records, but I call it universe doing its own audit. And that is exactly the moment we are witnessing today. In the case involving Omoyele Sowore, Department of State Services, and the unexpected presence of the ambassadorial designate, Reno Omokri, right in the middle of it. Because in a system where power often outruns justice, words don't disappear. They wait. They wait for the moment when those who once dismissed them are forced to explain them. This isn't justice by design. It is consequences by inevitability. And that is why this moment matters. Rena's appointment was never a reward. It was a spite move, a message aimed at opposition figures and the movement challenging the current government, saying, look at who we elevated. Politics as provocation. But that decision was made through a very narrow lens. A lens focused on short-term optics, not long-term consequences. They thought about silencing critics, not about protecting the state. What they failed to consider was the collective damage because when you elevate a man whose words publicly accuse the government's head of criminality, you don't weaken the opposition. You strengthen their evidence. You don't bury the past. You only archive it at the highest level. A move intended to spite opponent has backfired, not against the opponent, but against the very government it was meant to defend. And that is how power injures itself, not through enemies, but through decisions made without foresight. Traore has taken Reno to a place he never imagined he would stand, as a witness against his own government. And that irony is brutal. Reno Mokri is not being dragged for policy, but is being dragged by spoken words, words he said boldly, repeatedly, and confidently about the President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. Words he said he had proof, words he said he had evidence, and he had conviction about. He asserted it. He said the president was a known G-Baron. For the sake of social media policy, I'll use that word. And suddenly, something interesting happened. Reno Mokri changed his mind. Now let this sink in. A man who said he had evidence was never asked to present it, but suddenly found satisfaction without examination. If that doesn't sound ridiculous to you, then you have completely lost your sense of logic. Conviction does not dissolve because power has shifted. Yet, the APC government looked at all this and said, yes, this is our man. Despite the controversy, despite the public record, despite the embarrassment, they screened him, they cleared him, and they appointed him. And in doing that, they spat on themselves. Because here is the uncomfortable truth. Any country that sends Reno Mokri out as an ambassador is reopening a wound it claims as healed. Anywhere Reno Mokri is posted to, the first thing that will follow is internet search. And the internet will remind the world that this man, Reno, once accused his own president of being a criminal with alleged proof. You cannot rebrand that. You cannot diplomatically smile that away. And so people will say politicians don't care about their reputation. That's not true. Politicians care deeply about reputation as much as they care about power. If not, there would be no spin doctors, which makes this decision even baffling because Nigeria has hundreds, if not thousands of people who serve this government quietly, professionally, and without baggage. But the system did not choose them. It chose the loudest mouth, the man whose public identity is built on slander. And that is the real indictment here, because an ambassador is not just a position. An ambassador is a country's image abroad. And if Reno Mokri represents Nigeria, then Nigeria is presenting itself as a state that elevates controversy over credibility. This is not just about Reno Mokri. This is about a system that sabotages itself. A system that claims it wants stability but rewards recklessness. And despite where you stand against this government, let this be said clearly. There is no Nigerian that has embarrassed this government like Reno Mokri. And this remains a national embarrassment. Because when a government cannot protect its own dignity, it exposes its weakness. Reno Mokri should never have passed screening, not because of opposition politics, but because of record. Screening is not formality. It is supposed to protect the state from exactly this kind of self-inflicted damage. But instead, the system failed and now it is bleeding from its own decisions. Shawari did not create this problem. He simply picked it up and held it to the light. It is a truth at a time. Take care and have a nice day.